Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including new PTCGO Hidden Fates codes, you can go ahead and look at the Potown store for all your code needs. Moving on to today's video, however, we are going to be looking at the results from the Melbourne special event. It was only a small event with 127 Masters, but it does give us our first look at the post-Worlds meta, kind of looking at how the response has been from the Worlds tournament. Obviously, it's kind of the first time where Worlds sort of sets up the entire season, and this special event is going to be the first of a handful of events coming up that will sort of be a knee-jerk reaction to see what decks are going to be doing well in our format. I'm attending the Sheffield Regionals this weekend, and there'll be another video about that this week, and really sort of set the tone for what decks are going to be best for that event. So I think this is definitely worth looking into, and we can have a look at some successful lists. Starting off with Kaiwan winning the special. He is, of course, the player piloting Pikarom at Worlds to a very good finish as well. I believe it was top 4. Oh no, it was top 8. Henry beat him in top 8. And now he's able to take the victory here, which is awesome, get some payback. And he is once again playing Pikarom. He's playing 3 Jirachi, 2-2 of the main tag teams, double to Dene. It's got the 1-0 Aura, Zapdos Coco, still playing that Sigilyph, his kind of textbook card. Now taking in a Mew for Mirror, in addition to the Sigilyph, which is pretty cool. Just playing the Lilies and Volkners, pretty similar to his initial Worlds list. The biggest surprise comes in a moment where we look down towards the stadium counts, and the time has finally come for Power Plant to even enter Pikarom builds. That's right. Pretty surprising to see this myself, because a lot of the time you are reliant on Dedenne turn 1, but because Kaiwan's built his list with only 1-0 Aura and he has the 4 copies of Switch and 1 board, he's not that reliant on 0 Aura, so you can see where the mentality is, where you're going to try and lock the Power Plant in against things like Mewtwo and a few things like that. That's kind of a cool idea, I think, especially combining it with Reset Stamp, trying to make life more difficult for some of these decks, especially with things like Ability Zard coming out and being such a popular deck. Adding in Power Plants for those 2 matchups seems reasonable. I think I am a little concerned that he doesn't play more outs to opposing Power Plants, like if you come up against Green Zard or even like Guardian to an extent, especially now that you don't have the labs to get around the annoying Lightning Charms. You might have a couple more awkward matchups. So I don't hate Power Plant coming in, but I would definitely want to have a 4th stadium and just have 1 labs in here, because you only have the 3 Volkner, the 1 Nav, and the 1 Thunder Mountain being bounces to opposing Power Plants. And that's the thing that makes me a little bit afraid for your turn 1 outs to draw cards. So I think that's the only thing that I kind of question. He has cut away from the Hoopers and the Cyrus. They were clearly tech cards for Malamar. Malamar performed poorly at Worlds, so it's no surprise that he's tried to dedicate his tech cards towards other areas. And Power Plant is definitely an interesting include. I think it might be one that we see a few people take on board, because again, Mewtwo and Ability Zard are very powerful archetypes and worth teching for, but I'm surprised that this deck doesn't have a little bit of extra protection against, like I said, those charms, as well as what's it called, opposing Power Plants. I'd like to see a 4th stadium come into this list. It's also a bit of anti-synergy playing Sigilyph and double Power Plant, but of course you can try and navigate it how you like, but it's a small thing there as well. In at number 2 we have Angus with an Ability Charizard. There were 2 Green Zards, 2 Ability Zards, 2 Pikaroms, 1 Mewtwo and 1 Quagsire deck to round out the top 8, which I think is a relatively fair representation of the best decks right now. I think definitely Ability Zard, Pikarom and Mewtwo stand up there. Green Zard still doing very well, and Quagsire being a bit of an outlier for me. But let's move on to this Ability Zard list. It is also... So one of the things I did in my video was I dropped the scoop ups, and it feels like a few people have tried to take that on board. This list is adding in the Volcanion, the Turtonator. Oh no, Turtonator was always there, but yeah, it adds in the Volk, it adds in the Finny, and it adds in the Mew. These are basically the cuts that I made for my video. It only played 17 energy instead of 18, in air quotes. and it's playing the slightly higher switch count because you're not playing scoop ups. So this is basically all the changes I made for my double League Cup winning list. So obviously I'm in favour. I like Finny to give yourself a nice way to beat Blacephalon with relative ease. You now have this, you have Turtonator, you have Victini Prism, and you have Heatran, all as reasonable attackers in that matchup. So you never even need to bench a Reshizard against Blounds. So that sounds pretty good. And everything else is just like a streamlined version of this build. Having the Volcanium means you don't just instantly lose mirrors if you go second, which is cool. So I'm in favour in basically all these changes. I actually really like this list. I think it's a really good job. Nice second place list. Carol gets a top 4 with a greens build. Now I'm still skeptical of greens. I was doing a stream earlier today and I kind of like dunked on greens. I thought it's like a pretty weak deck. But it's still getting a couple results here and there, which is interesting to see from my end, because I think its matchup spread gets a lot worse now that Ability Zard is like a popular deck, and I think Ability Zard should be heavily favoured, to be honest. But it's interesting to see this deck still perform relatively well. It's playing the heavy Acrobike, it's got the one Lusamine and a nice plethora of stadiums. There's not too much else. It's the heavy healing build with the 4 great pots. There's not too much else to say about the list, other than trying to have the higher power plant count plus Lusamine to try and stick that against people, I guess. It's quite important. It has the Shrine to, again, help out against Pikarom and stuff like that, so something to bear in mind. But yeah, interesting to see Green Zard still successful, even though Ability Zard is around. I don't know who knocked out who in terms of the top 4, but here we go. I think Kaiwin had to play Henry in top 4, so I think Ability Zard did end up beating a Reshizard, so yeah, kind of goes in sort of how I believe the matchup should go. Henry's made a couple of tweaks from his World's Winning list to get a very impressive top 4. He's got the main change as adding in a Shady Tail Wob. Wob's a nice tech card right now, especially for Mewtwo, because you play treasures, so you can find this guy. Obviously, it can slow down Pikaroms, which is fantastic. Also, it can deny the Victini Prisms from being a late-game burst knockout against your Mew3s. So, a very clever tech card that Mew can take on board now, and I think it's one that might have to be replicated in future. I think it's a very cute card to include, and I think it's also very good. Cobalion stays in here. I think this will be the last time you see Cobalion in the list, because I think the new Charizard from Hidden Fates will probably take up this slot, because you basically want to have a GX attack that can do 300 for 4 energy. That's too good to say no to, and that means in turn you probably don't want to be island ruling stuff. But other than that, basically the entire engine is the same from there. He's changed his Fire Crystal to an energy recycle system. Gives him the option to get back Psychic Energies immediately and stuff if you need to as well. So everything else is pretty much the same list, and Henry still proving why Mewtwo is a huge threat, especially with that Wob being a nice include going forward. Brent Tonneson also playing Pikarom. He's playing the heavy Jirachi build, so that's definitely the ones that are going deep in tournaments right now, which is good to know. He's only playing one Choo-Choo, which is a little bit risky, but something to bear in mind. There's a potential cut. He's also playing Mew, so a lot of people are looking out for mirrors now by the looks of things. And also Mew's good against Mewtwo as well, because it stops them just sniping with Naga from your discard pile. Not too much else to say. This looks like a very standard Pikarom. Like, this is the vanilla Pikarom. If you just want to take a list from here, this is just like as basic as it comes. I think a lot of people will play double Choo-Choo. It's like the only thing that you would change, but everything just looks very straightforward, and yeah, looks like a really nice safe list to go off of if you just have nothing else to play. Interestingly enough, both builds of Pikarom doing well were not the Judge ROMs. They were just like imposing their own strategy with Jirachis and whatnot, so definitely something to bear in mind. Judge ROM did reasonably well at Worlds, but obviously Kaiwin made top 8 with a non-Judge build, and now once again it's sort of being reinforced that just Jirachis and Stamps is probably like the safest way to go with the deck. We see another Ability Zard doing well. Once again, it's dropping the Super Scoop Ups. I don't know if Super Scoop Up is like just wrong in the deck, or we need to dedicate these spaces to other things. Like, because Mirror's a thing now and because Malamar's like less good, maybe that's why everyone's made the same changes that I ended up doing. But I think it's just good to see, really. It's, you know, adding in the Finny, adding in the Volk, it will make sense. This one isn't playing Mew. Mew's definitely a flexible card. You don't need it in the list, but it's just a nice safety net to have against the Pikaroms and against the Mewtwo's again that might try and snipe the Denes and stuff. So I like the cuts. Again, I'm just pretty much happy all around with these lists. I really think Ability Zard is just proving itself to be strong. Again, like I said, you can only do as much as you can for Mirror, and Volcanian's pretty much the only card you can include. So yeah, all makes sense there. Jay coming in with the Quagnag build. Interesting list for sure. I've not found Quagnag to be like an insane deck, but it's here to try and take a few matchups by storm. Thanks to its type coverage, you can see it's even got the Fighting Quagsire to help out against Pikarom. It's playing a thick line of Washout as well as a thick line of Nag. Obviously, with less Ball Search, you've got to have very thick lines of these. It's playing the heavy Keldeo to try and buy you some turns of early pressure, just like while this sits in the active, while they try and accumulate custom catches, you just kind of sit there with this guy, build up your energies, and force them to put annoying stuff in to play against you. It's got Magikarp Warlord. Towering Splash is still an option for you if you're up against Malamar. I think this is a little bit too cute in my personal opinion. I think, you know, it's one of these cards that you probably aren't going to be able to like achieve in a lot of matchups, I guess is the best way to put it, now that you can't draw that well. But I've not played enough Quagnag to know for certain that this isn't great. I guess something to bear in mind is that you can go from a Keldeo Smack into a Super Splash, which I guess finishes off things like Mewtwo in 2 attacks, so something to bear in mind perhaps. So yeah, that might be a reason why the Magikarp Whale is in here, mainly just for Super Splashing stuff. Volk Prism acts as Gusting, as well as, again, setting things up with Sauna Blast. Got the Ditto to Dene and the Mew to protect against, again, all that sniping that we have in the game right now. It's playing just a pretty vanilla kind of supporter line and everything. I like the gears being added in to help consistency. Basically, all the cuteness is in the Pokemon, and then it's just playing maximum copies of everything because they know for a fact that the deck is clunky, so they've gone as safe as possible with the train account, which I do respect. I think that's probably a very good shout. And yeah, it looks pretty good to me. Having no answer to Paralysis is a bit worrying, potentially. And also like confusion and stuff, but maybe it's something that they can get around just by paying Retreat and charging back up. So yeah, maybe that's why they go for it. Joshua playing the Green Zard once again. Again, it's fairly high on the healing. It's playing Double Great Pot. Still playing those Acrobikes. Lusamine seems to be like a mainstay. This time we're seeing the Dojo Spinner build successful. This is what Rahul and a few other people played at Worlds, and it's being carried out again with the big split of 5 individual stadium cards and Lusamine to try and recover the important ones for the right matchups and try and make sure you win the stadium war. So yeah, Greens is still doing relatively well. This is a bit of a surprise for me personally. I don't think Greens is all that powerful, but 2 making, you know, 1 making top 4, 1 making top 8 is still proving itself to be strong. As you look down though, no one else in the top 32 was playing Greens. So just a couple making it through everyone else and not much else performing. However, what you can see is a bunch of Ability Zard. Ability Zard floods this top 32. It is everywhere. So you saw some of these top 8 lists playing that Volk, helping you win mirrors. That's going to be important for the next few tournaments. You can see Blacephalon not in the top 8, but almost getting there as well, with some pretty powerful performances in at 9th and 11th. Ability Zard everywhere. We see a very cool checkmate build from James Cox. I'm not going to go into too much detail about all this stuff. It looks very similar to Xander's list from the Open. And I think you can only really go 1 or 2 cards away from Xander's list because it was so specific and every card served a purpose in that list, so something to bear in mind. Interestingly, in the top 32, you don't see much Mew 3. I don't think it's that popular of an archetype right now. There are 2 here, and of course there's a tin coming out that gives you more accessibility to Mew 3. Price may be a reason why there's not more of this deck right now, but it feels like a lot of people are just jumping straight on Ability Zard and are playing that a lot, so something to bear in mind. We see a lot more Pikarom as well in here, so it feels like for popularity, Pika-Rom and Ability Zard are way up there right now. Mew 3 and Green Zard still very popular and powerful contenders making their way through. Malamar falling off the map. Not even a single Malamar in the top 32 here, which is incredible. And yeah, pretty much just everyone trying out the new Tord list, basically. So yeah, that is going to be it for the top 32 rundown and the top 8 mainly from this tournament. I think things to bear in mind are, of course, some power plants potentially going into Pika, which is a very interesting include, and just the power and prevalence of Ability Zard going to be everywhere. It's really going to be popular. The mirror is difficult to tech for, but you know, some people may try and find ways to do that, and it's really down to them to figure out how. So hope you did enjoy. It has been Joe from OmniPoke, and I'll see you in another video tomorrow. Cheers.